So we have the objects that I created earlier on my palette, and I'm moving around using the Alt and left mouse key to spin around my objects. So what I'm going to do is show you a few tools in your toolbar. The first is the Select tool, the next is the Lasso tool, and then some image manipulating tools such as the Move tool, the Rotate tool, and the Scale tool. If I select an object by clicking on it with my Select tool, I can then choose the Move tool to lift it up and down, left and right. Whenever you choose the Move tool, you'll see a set of arrows, and this lets you know your bearings. This is up, one side across, and the other side across. So if I grab the red arrow here, I can only move in this direction. If I grab the blue arrow, I can only move in that direction. And if I grab the green arrow, I can only move up and down. If I want to just freely move it anywhere I want to, I just grab the center square, and I can move this object around wherever I want, up, down, left, right. The next tool is the Rotate tool. So if I select this tool here, it will give me a wheel. And this is very similar to the Move tool, which it has a blue, a red, and a green. So I can spin it this direction by pulling on the green, I can rotate it this direction by pulling on the red, and I can rotate it this direction by pulling on the blue. And if you grab this outer blue ring, this is dependent on what direction you're looking at it. So if I turn it, say, this direction and grab it, it'll spin it in the direction I'm viewing it at. Alright, the next tool is the Scale tool, and that is right here. If I choose the Scale tool, I'll get a few different square boxes. The center box, the yellow one, controls how large the entire object is, and if I grab that, it just gets larger, smaller, the whole thing. If I grab the green one, it stretches it out. And the red one pulls it in that direction, and of course the blue one pulls it in the other direction. So that's a quick introduction to the tools. The other tool I didn't show you is the Lasso tool. This is very similar to the Select tool. But if I wanted to select a set of objects, I would choose the Lasso tool, and I can just draw a lasso around the objects I want to select. So I'm going to select these 4 over here and not the cone. And that is how that tool works. I can now grab these 2 if I want. The other thing I'm going to show you with the Select tool over here is if you want to select a series of objects, if I want to get a few of them and I don't want to use my Lasso tool, I'm going to click on the first object, the cone. I'm going to hold Shift, I'm going to click on my sphere, and the donut, and the pipe, and the cube. And if I want to, say, unselect a certain object, just hold down Shift and click it again. So I'm going to unselect the donut. This is helpful if I want to move or rotate a series of objects. I can go to my Move tool. I can pull these objects up and down, across one direction, the other direction, or I can just freely move the whole group by grabbing the center square. I can also go to the Rotate tool, and the whole group will move in weird directions if I spin them like that. And the Scale tool, I can enlarge all the objects, or I can stretch them out in different directions. The last thing I'm going to go into with basic manipulation is how to duplicate objects. So with an object selected, I might use my Move tool. So I'm going to select this donut object here. And on your keyboard, if you press Control and hold it down and then press D, it duplicates the object. And it duplicates it right on top of the other object. So you have to grab one of the Move arrows and slide it out. You can also do this with a series of objects. So if I click on that one, Shift select that one, and let's say this cube, I can Control D And now I have duplicates of all these objects, so it's infinite how many times you can duplicate objects. Let's move on to intermediate object manipulation tools. I'm going to create a sphere on my palette here, and I'm going to create a cube. For every object, there's an attribute editor and a channel box layer editor. If I click on one of my objects with any of the tools over here, this one, or any of the move, rotate, or scale tools, in the right corner called the channel box layer editor. And this gives you some options for your object. For example, when I'm working with this sphere, pull it right here, there's an inputs box called Polysphere 1. If I click on that, it lets me control how many subdivisions on the height and across the axis of the object. Right now it says there's 20 in each direction. I can change this number and type in my own number. Now it's even more low res. Or I can make it double what it was before and make it 40 on the height and axis. And my object will be much more smooth. Same with this cube over here. If I go to the inputs, I can click on Polycube, and I can change how many subdivisions are on the width, height, and depth. Right now there's 1 for each, but let me put 5, say, on the width. Now you can see 5 across. On the height, I'll put, say, 10. And maybe on the depth, I'll put 3. And you can see how that translates into my object. Besides giving it a little bit more resolution, this also gives you more control over manipulating the object. Up at the top is your object and component mode. Typically Maya's on object mode, but if I go over to my component mode and click on it, you'll see these little purple squares in all the corners. These are called points or vertex. And what these allow me to do is click on them and move them around. Or I can draw a marquee around a group of them and move them. I can even use my scale tool or my rotate tool on them. So the more faces you have on your object, the more you can manipulate that object. Same with the sphere here. I'll grab a few of these points. Maybe I'll grab them around each direction. Let me get my scale tool. Go back to it. And I'm just going to select groups of these points. And I'm holding down my shift key so I can keep adding points to my selection. I'm going to click and just kind of drag marquees around parts of it, all around my sphere. Now with my scale tool, if I just enlarge the center square, I can blow this object out. If I go back to object mode, I can't control these points anymore. I can just move the entire object at once. Either move it up and down, scale it, or rotate it. Once I go into my component mode, I can now control these points. Also, to undo anything that you've done in Maya, just click Z on your keyboard. And if I keep clicking it, it will start undoing everything I did and stepping back in time. Now my sphere is back to normal. You can right mouse click on any object. It doesn't matter if you're in object mode or component mode. That doesn't matter at all. Just right click on it and go to face. And if you go to face, you can select different parts of your object. And if I hold down shift, I can select multiple parts or maybe draw a marquee and grab a whole section. And this is very similar to the vertex points because I can pull these around, stretch them out, use my scale tool on them, even rotate them if I want to do some weird things to that. But the difference between points and the faces is if I hit delete on my keyboard, it just punches holes where those faces were. Those faces completely delete, and I can make kind of a Death Star looking thing if I just keep holding shift and highlighting and marqueing around pieces and then deleting it. Another option when you right-click on your object is Vertex. There's also Edge, and Edge lets you select, let me zoom in here, it lets you select the edges that make up the object. So I can shift select different parts or highlight whole sections. And I can also delete these, but these won't punch faces in my object. These will just delete those edges, so my object will look kind of odd because it doesn't have the polygons to make up the shape anymore. So there you have it. Just right-click on any object, go to Face, Vertex, Edge, and you have different ways to manipulate your object. Selecting an object and hitting Control-A will bring you into your attribute editor or your channel box layer editor. So back and forth, you can switch between the two by just hitting Control-A. All right, let's move forward onto some more advanced object manipulation tools.